Welcome along, everybody, to our second ever live episode. Mr. Andrew Humphreys said yesterday to me, are you looking forward to the live episode? I said, yes, I'm always looking forward to the live episodes. And he said, well, it's only the second one that you've done. So fair point. Fair point. It does seem like we've done plenty of them before. But yes, welcome along, everybody, to For F's Sake, second live episode. I'm pleased to say all our guests have turned up. They were chatting American stuff, two of them, before we came on. The rest of us were kind of looking a bit perplexed. But yes, we're joined by Elliot from Whistle Stop Footy. If you go onto Instagram and Facebook and TikTok and all those things, you'll see his pages on there. Once again, we're joined by our regular co-host now, Mike, because we've done two and you've been at both of them. So Mike from the referee circle and, of course, refereeing royalty himself. Gibraltar's number one. Are you number one referee now, Seth? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I tell myself, at least.
Seth Galia, former Northants FA official, until he got a big money transfer back over to the Rock. That is the Rock in Gibraltar, not the wrestler or actor. Over there on the in sunnier climes. Although you're not in Gibraltar at the moment, Seth, I'm led to believe.
We just got back a couple of hours ago. We had our training camp in Benelux, which, we stayed at quite a nice golf resort. So when I was listening to Scotty tell me about a Sunday morning game this morning, I did make me feel a lot better about myself.
Didn't know you were a golfer, Seth. Did you play golf when you were over in Northamptonshire? Some nice golf courses over here.
Yeah, no, I think the weather during my time in Kingsthorpe wasn't perhaps the most appealing for golf.
Yeah, I don't like golf. Are you a fan of golf, Luke?
I'm rubbish at golf.
That doesn't surprise me.
Really bad. I enjoy the clubhouse part of golf, but that's about it.
So yes, we are joined by Seth. We're going to have a little chat about his career and stuff, and we have got some questions lined up and things like that. Clearly, in Seth's position, there'll be certain points in the conversation where we don't allow him to speak, which will be very difficult for him, I'm sure. But that's why we've got the other two guys here alongside me and Luke, as per usual. If you do have any questions, pop them into the chat, and I'm assuming we'll be able to see them, and we'll get through those questions if they are appropriate at certain points during the live show. So, and it'll also be recorded and be released on Tuesday as a podcast, as per usual. So if you do miss any of the fun, then obviously you can pick that back up later on. And I'm sure that Elliot, being the technical guru that he is on social media, I'm sure he'll be taking some bits and bobs and putting stuff on his page and stuff as well. So we'll tap into that as well. So Seth, clearly when you came over to England, were you 18 at that time?
Yeah, 18.
It's nice to think that we took you under our wings, introduced you to Domino's Pizza and the Sunnyside Public House.
Yeah, looking back, I'm not sure we were that helpful, Wayne.
I'll never forget the first time me and you met, Seth. Do you remember the first time you and I met?
It was at Moulton College, wasn't it?
It was, and in those days, the NFA, Northants Football Association, weren't so tight, and they paid for our lunches, and we got a pizza. We got some pizzas delivered, I believe. And you, being the prime athlete that you were and definitely are now, you turned them down.
Yeah, at the time I thought, and the more I got to know you, the more I realized how erroneous I was in this assumption. But I thought you'd paid for them. I thought, no, I'm not gonna take this man's pizzas.
No chance.
Yeah, but the more I got to know you, Wayne, the more I realized how foolish I was to have thought that.
So when you came over to England from Gibraltar, you were already obviously a qualified referee, and I think you step into level 5 of our system when you came over, or yeah.
So I joined at level 5.
So you had to talk Scotty round. What was the conversation, Luke, about him coming over. Do you remember getting this notification that this young whippersnapper was at the University of Northampton, and what were you going to do about it?
Well, I think initially the contact came because you had connections with Liverpool, did you not, Seth?
Yeah, I think because I was going to go at one point to Liverpool, and then I changed and went to Northampton. So I was already registered. Otherwise, I'm sure Luke would have put me in a much lower level.
No, look, it's not our decision. The FA make that decision, and we just do what we're told.
Yeah, so no, it was. I came over registered as a level 5, so it was quite seamless. No, on the Northern side, which was always quite helpful.
Oh, nice. So you managed to get into level 5, and then you went onto the promotion system. So as many of our listeners are aware, the promotion system in England is you go kind of 7-6-5 very quickly these days, and then you get to go through the system. And I remember, I think you know what's coming here, Seth. I remember sitting in that massive stand at Wellingborough Town as you gave the worst back pass decision that Luke or I'd ever seen, and you got away with it.
Great observer that day. Great observer.
But it was a terrible decision, wasn't it? Let's be honest.
The match report doesn't say that. The observer report does not say that.
Yeah, but if we talk about self-reflection, Seth, it was a bad decision, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's one of those where as soon as you hit the whistle, you just think, what on earth have I just done?
Yeah. Because it was quite early in the game as well, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, you never, ever want to... You always try and avoid giving indirect free kicks inside the area. I think that's always one of those areas where, you know something is going to happen from it. So that decision in particular, I don't think helped with that. And I just, as soon as I'd given it, I'd made a mistake. So when the observer told me he agreed with the decision, hey, what result that was? But no, really, really poor decision, and obviously didn't help having you two in the stands because, as you can imagine, Mike and Elliot, they were nothing but encouraging and supportive throughout the whole debrief.
I don't think we dare go in for the debrief, but this is the problem, Elliot, Mike, with the system in England that you can still get away with these decisions and get to FIFA, evidently.
I'm intrigued. What was the decision? Yeah. Sounds like you're regretting it now, but what you got away with it. But what happened?
Some detail, please.
Yeah, so I, at the time, I think reflecting back, erroneously thought that a defender had clearly and intentionally played the ball back to his own goalkeeper, who then picks the ball up. And I was very, very quick with that whistle and to give the indirect free kick. And as soon as I hit the whistle, 22 confused faces all looked at me and thought, what on earth is this person doing? Because they honestly didn't know. There was no appeal. There was no sort of expectation for a back pass in that instance. So I think that was one of the biggest things, where you go so quick to give a decision and then you sort of realize that you're the only person who thinks something has happened. It's quite a wake up call. So looking back at it now, I do think that was quite a good learning curve.
When you said 22 confused faces on the pitch, there was several more confused faces around the pitch, apart from one clearly who
he was just beaming with pride. It was great. Yeah, no, thankfully Wellingborough Town, I don't think picked up too large of a gathering.
All right, here he comes. It's about the same attendance as a Gibraltar Premier League game, I believe, these days.
Oh, dang it to that.
No. So then you went. I think you got your level 4 that season, didn't you?
Yeah.
And I think you went. Didn't you go quite quickly to level 3? Were you only a level 4 for one season?
No. So first year, I think I finished B for observers and B for clubs, which was a good first season. I didn't really have any sort of expectations to have done as well as I did, and then the following season, again, I think perhaps somewhat fortunately, a pandemic cut the season short whilst I was top for observers. And they still took me on. So it was, Myles-Skelly, I'm probably not giving you the best impression here. But yeah, no, so I ended up in my second season, albeit.
So you forget, or we forget, I mean, you're still a young pup, really. And it wasn't that long ago that you were actually on that pitch at Wellingborough Town, and then you got to level 3. But is that when you moved? Because you did another year of study in England, didn't you? And you moved to, when you moved up north to the northwest?
Yeah, so I did when I finished at Northampton, I went to Cardiff to do my law conversion course. At the time, the pandemic was on, so a lot of football was stopped. I think everything below National League North and South was stopped, and it was quite similar in Wales. So it's kind of dueling between both FAs, but the majority of my games at the time would have been as assistant referee on the National League South, and on the what's the one just below the Premier League Series, Professional Development League. Am I right in saying?
Yeah.
On that, as well as the games in Wales. And then the following year, I went to Liverpool to do my masters, and that's where I really had my first sort of real run out as a level 3 referee, which I really enjoyed. And unfortunately, it was my one and only full year as a level 3. But it was a great experience, and getting to go around England and seeing the different places and meeting the different guys and refereeing the different teams. You really do appreciate how different it can be in those different places. Refereeing on the Southern League or running the line as I was then, and then actually refereeing in the Northern Prem. Even that in itself was quite different. So I thought it was good learning for me to take back once I ended up coming back to Gib.
And was your intention always to go back to Gibraltar once you finished your studies? I mean, could we not tempt you back to the sunny side for a game of pool?
I mean, I absolutely love it. And I think back, like you say, it wasn't that long ago. So much has happened, but it wasn't actually that long ago since I was with you guys. And, I do really enjoy every time I go back. But I think it just got to the point now where I was really getting a bit homesick and really missing family. So I just thought, as much as I love it here in the UK, and as great as it is for football, because, I think it is one of the best places in the world to really develop as a referee. I just thought, my life's in Gib. So, as soon as I finished my masters and my further education, I moved back to Gibraltar.
Anything from our American cousins? Any questions at this point, Mike?
No, I'm just again, the elevation for referees from, how you guys handle it in England and how it's handled. I know here in the US is just a little bit, it's similar, but it's always evolving and it's very different. So I'm still learning a lot of the progression scales that you guys have. So that's all very helpful information and very interesting. So,
Elliot, anything you want to ask at this point?
Congratulations on the progression. It's great. When you progress through the levels, you adapt accordingly in an upward direction. Have you ever come back down, as a FIFA referee and refereed at a lower level and had to adjust your refereeing style to suit that level? And what differences did you observe?
I think it's a good question. It's one where no matter what you may feel or how sort of high up you may think you are, what you have to remember is for those 22 players, that is their most important game of the week. So even though you may be used to refereeing at one level, going down to another one, you can never perceive it in any way as being a negative, because really that game needs to be treated with the utmost respect as you would with any other. The expectations on certain decisions and the expectations and certain procedures surrounding the game and the way you communicate those decisions, I think, are those elements. But in terms of your preparation, I don't think you can ever really look at something differently. I mean, Luke, Wayne, jump in here, because I know you guys have definitely done your stuff with your Sunday league games in England. For you guys, you must know that even though there is a different expectation on it, those players that ultimately you've got 22 players who haven't, one team's going to win. And
I think it's difficult, isn't it? Because I had an example in my Sunday morning game this morning where we're probably 20, 25 minutes in, and I've cautioned a player for a reckless challenge, which some of the reaction was, oh, that's a bit harsh, isn't it? Now, in my head, it was kind of an orange card. It was like, it was a bit naughty. He's caught him just above the ankle, and he's caught him with the studs. And so I'm thinking orange, but due to player reaction and things like that, on a Sunday morning, kind of, I've gone, right, I'll go safe with yellow. And it turns out yellow wasn't particularly safe, because some of the players were like, well, that's a bit harsh. It's only his first one. And I'm like, yeah, but I think on a Saturday that's probably a red, mate. Like, I'm like, I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, and then the poor lad's still rolling around on the floor because it must have hurt. And I'm stood there. I don't know where to pitch this now. I'm sorry if I've overreacted. I was like, but genuinely, I thought I was doing the right thing by going for the lesser sanction that out of my two options. And I think that's the difficulty and expectation around changing from a higher level potentially on a Saturday and then going to the real grassroots stuff. And I think the NEN League, the Sunday morning league that we operate on, they're really keen to see us try and officiate those games in the same way that we would a Saturday game. And whilst I think that's an admirable approach, sometimes it's not the best approach for the players. And we obviously, as referees and the people in control of those games, we have to take that into consideration as well. What do the players want? What do the players expect? And how are the players viewing it? And sometimes that has to play a part in our decision making, I think.
I think there's a good point to come in for you now, Mike, because we only this afternoon we were looking at a clip, weren't we, where a goalkeeper had the ball in their hands, and the cheeky striker, shall we say, came along, kicked the ball out of the goalkeeper's hands, not with any intensity or any malice, and then put the ball in the net and ran off celebrating. And obviously the referee went, actually, you can't do that. And we, as social media is, you always get those people who question Mike's interpretation and my interpretation, which was actually it depends on the kind of tempo of the game and the temperature of the game and the reaction of people as to how you deal with that situation. I was thinking, well, you just tell him, look, stop being a chump, basically, and let's get on with it. Whereas you get those other people going, well, that should be a yellow card. And what happens later on if you second caution him, you didn't caution him in the first place, and you spoiled the game for everybody and all this kind of thing. Well, I think with a bit more experience, like you were just saying there, Luke, you can gauge player reaction, can't you? What is the expectation in that morning? I think sometimes some referees can be, sometimes if they're lacking experience, can become a little bit officious, and they go, "Oh, it is law," and this, and where sometimes you, especially on a Sunday morning, you've got a little bit more leeway. I think, Mike, you can come in there at that point. Yeah,
no, that's. I think you've hit the nail right on the head, especially as in the pre-shows we were talking about the small-sided men's leagues that Elliot and I do a lot of. It becomes a lot of common sense playing. It's somewhat about what the players are expecting, but it's also somewhat balanced against what the laws of the game are calling for. And you kind of have to find that sweet spot somewhere right in the middle where, we're not doing, full on FIFA laws of the game here. We have to have some common sense, and we can't apply every little thing to the letter of the law. We do have to treat the laws as the framework and allow us to have some of that common sense and some of that discretion in order to kind of keep the lid on the game and, get from beginning to the end and still have, a good quality game on our hands.
What about you, Elliot? Because obviously you've done small-sided both sides of the ocean. Do you find a difference? Do you have to adjust your style for the different leagues that you've done, thousands of miles apart, I guess?
I asked myself that question, whatever it was, a year ago, after having been in the States for 6 years and then coming back to the UK. I was curious to figure out, okay, I've got this quite nice relationship with players that I ref here in the States. How much of that is because they hear my English accent and they see the 3 lions on my kit, and they might superimpose a level of credibility upon me that I don't earn? Am I going to get that when I come back to the UK? And I found that my style of reffing applies just as well here in the UK. Most games go smoothly. And the last time I was on your show, we had a little chat about consistency, didn't we? And I think what a lot of non-referees don't realize is the amount of interaction that there is within any game, whether it's 5-a-side, 11-a-side, between the referee and the players. And we're selling our decisions. We're doing a little bit of give and take with players. They might have a little grumble at us. And, you know, if consistency is absolutely what people want, then the yellow card's going to come out for those. Yes, he delayed the restart of play. I'm not having it any other way. But, you know, we're constant little negotiations with our decisions with players. And when players buy into our style, then I think the common sense that we're applying, it lands.
I think
But
when we
bear in mind, you're talking to someone. I have sent off a kid at my nephew's 10th birthday party, so you know I don't get it right all the time.
Seth, I was going to say, I think we mentioned this last time, and so when you went back to Gibraltar from England as a level 3, I'm assuming, what level did you pitch up at in Gibraltar? Were you straight onto the Premier League?
Yes, I think because of the whole, like I mentioned before, the whole pandemic, I was going home quite often those years. So Gibraltar FA thought it would be a good time to make the most of having no crowds in the stadiums, as you know, was the practice everywhere, to start throwing me on the Gibraltar Premier games, because I think, you know, it's not just exclusive to Gibraltar, but I think Evra found that the games without supporters were a lot less intense. And they thought that's a good way to throw a young guy on, throw him with a few of the experienced guys, and start giving him the opportunity to referee at this level. So I was sort of eased into it. So then by the time I came back in 2022, I was already doing a few of the games at the top level. So I sort of had cemented myself in at that point, which was great. But again, you know, it was quite a fortunate opportunity to have had that exposure.
But did you have to adapt your style? Because, you know, I mean, you think about the UCL as blood and thunder, and is it a more technical game in Gibraltar?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I was actually going to ask earlier in terms of the comparison between UK and America, because I mean, certainly what I found with Gibraltar was it's a lot more of a continental approach. We get a lot of players coming from across the border from Spain. We've got a lot of players coming in from South America. So the approach which I took during my time in England, I found was maybe not as well received when I came back here. You know, in terms of letting play go on. And the expectation was actually let's have a game, try and avoid whistling for everything. Whereas the reality was here they prefer that more stop-start approach. So really it is about knowing your audience and knowing what the players are actually looking to achieve in terms of communication as well. I think you could have a conversation more often than not in the UK, whereas here they don't care. They don't want an explanation. They just want foul, no foul, and by engaging with them, you could actually cause more problems for yourself. So it was these kind of things which I thought, okay, you know, it's a different environment to what I've had for the last 5 years. But that being said, I think that exposure to English football was perhaps one of the biggest benefits for my personal development.
So do you find that the kind of being a FIFA ref now, and obviously the kind of exposure to the training and development and their level of expectation and kind of how they impress upon you how the laws should be how you should interpret the laws of the game when you're applying them and things like that. Do you find that actually really useful, because you're ref into quite a solid framework in terms of your decision making processes, or actually do you find that quite restrictive on the flip side, because it kind of takes away that sometimes that element of common sense and management approach that you might have wished to take if you were ref in a UCL game, for example?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, all of our games now are videoed. All of our our communication kits, they're all recorded as well. So when you sit down and review it after, and you're listening to what was being said, you're reviewing it from the different angles, and they sat down with you. They don't really want to hear how you've got away with some decision, which may be the case in the UCL, where you can apply that more common sense approach. Whereas here, really, look, ultimately, people are expecting you at that level to apply the laws of the game and apply them consistently. So we do get a lot of that. I mean, consistency, I think, is one of the biggest things. I mean, we've just come back from, our Gibraltar Football League referees have had a training camp, as I mentioned earlier, and that whole week was just watching not just local clips and domestic clips from our games, but the UEFA clips with their guidelines and their interpretation on certain decisions, which I think they're trying to stamp up across throughout all the member states.
One of the questions that came in from our community, we have a WhatsApp community, was about the sacrifices, because obviously you went to university and you've got a good job working in law. I mean, Luke and I are still surprised about this. I've been knowing you for 3 years. But what sacrifices have you had to make to get to level now, and how does that affect your work-life balance, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think I saw that come in earlier, and I thought that is a really good question, because I think it's not so much that, look, we do this because we really enjoy it, and I think that's the case for most people. No, the reason why we give up our time is because we're doing something which we really enjoy. But a lot of the time, it's the people around you and the people that are closest to you that are ones that are impacted the most. I think, friends, family, those are the guys who actually may not see you when it comes to a special occasion. An example which I immediately thought of was this summer in August. I was meant to move into my new house with my girlfriend. A couple of weeks before our moving in date, we get an appointment come through from UEFA that we're off to Montenegro. So I ended up missing out. I mean, I kept on going, oh no, that's horrible. Oh, I would have loved to have been there. But I ended up missing out on that. And it's the people around you, I think, who are impacted the most, because the further up I think you go, the more that you're not the master of your own time, which I found was the biggest thing. So those are the biggest sacrifices, I think, when you miss out on close family events, and it's the people around you who get the most disappointed. But that's why I think it's so important to surround yourself with supportive and loving friends and family. Which I think just personally during my time in Northampton, I was blessed to have and continue to have, thankfully.
Well, what about work though? Has it affected your work? Obviously, you're in the infancy, I guess, of your career. I see your columns in certain publications, across the world, I guess. But has it affected your job at all, or adequate understanding of your position?
Yeah, I think they've been super supportive about it. I mean, we've come up with quite a good arrangement, which allows me to travel when I do receive these international appointments, which is great. I mean, but the same way as I like to think I'm a young aspiring referee, I'm also a young aspiring lawyer. So it is juggling it's between the two. But again, ultimately it comes back to what I said earlier. No, I think having a supportive employer who understands that this is actually something which you really enjoy doing as one of your hobbies, and if they can appreciate that, and if they can allow you that leeway and come up with that understanding, it makes it so much better. And you actually do find that you end up wanting to go in and you enjoy doing your work whilst you're there, because you know that you're being appreciated and valued. So whilst it can be a bit time consuming in that side, really I'm very grateful to be in the position which I am.
How do you have a half live, Mike Elliott? It's a little bit different, isn't it, to Luke? What we're used to, I would imagine.
Yeah.
I'm a recovering ex-lawyer.
Oh.
Out of rehab.
I'm in sales. I can work anywhere. I have access to a laptop, internet, and phone. I'm good. I can. I've one of the unique experiences I've had is I went and done a local professional teams training match. They had a Thursday scrimmage at 10 a.m. and they needed a referee. And my assigner rings me up at 9 a.m. and says, "Hey, can you get there?" I'm like, "Sure." I just put my out of office on and I went and refereed a match. It was fantastic.
A bit more difficult working in education to do that. Just with their kids.
Just put a movie on there, Wayne.
Luke, did you have another question to come up on this lovely screen? Did you have another question? Because I can't remember what it was. Any other question? Did we have another question?
Yeah, we do. There's the question about media.
Yes. So without getting into too much detail, and this is a question for everybody, we've seen the news, the PGMOL statement released today, I think it was, or yesterday, about the attitude and messages that Michael Oliver has been receiving. Elliot, I'll start with you. Do you think, having watched Match Today last night or whatever you watched, do you think the media, not just social media, but the mainstream media as well, do you think they have a responsibility towards match officials in terms of, we talk a lot about mental health these days, and quite rightly so, but do you think they've got a responsibility to understand the impact these things are having on match officials?
Do they have a responsibility? Well, I guess my perspective on this maybe has changed over the years, coming from the UK to the US, where free speech is on an absolute pedestal. And it wasn't until I got to the States where I could really appreciate the importance of free speech, and that where you have bad speech, the solution is not to cull that, it's to trump it with better speech. Good speech trumps bad speech. So with the media, I'm trying to think what would be an example of someone in the media going too far. Criticizing a ref for a decision they disagree with, fair game. Calling for a referee to resign or be sacked or have some sort of financial penalty, we're getting on the fringe there. I'm not aware of anyone in the media calling for physical harm to come to a referee. That would be an example of going too far. Have I missed an example? Have I missed something? I've seen the PGML's statement saying that we don't that they condemn threats towards Michael Oliver. The threats have come on social media, correct?
Yeah,
they haven't come from people in the media talking on BBC. Look, I think when it comes to hateful or aggressive or disagreeable speech, no, I think I'm not on the side of censorship. I'm on the side of beat it with better speech or tune out.
Seth, without going
actual calls for violence, then that's something else.
Seth, without going into that incident, do you, as a national official, and then moving on to being an international official, what kind of training do you get to deal with, first of all, media, and secondly, are you advised not to go onto social media?
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, social media can be a very, very, very good tool for promoting the good work that we do. And I think, the same as the case for all of you guys actually on the pod today. I mean, you guys all do a really good job in promoting refereeing, the benefits to, and the benefits and the sense of community that there is within it. And that can be the case. So in terms of, do they prevent us from going on social media? No, because I think they know that actually by showcasing, for example, I'll use myself here, being a young referee, that can potentially inspire other people to taking the route of refereeing as an alternative to playing and going through that. The problem is, as you guys have just mentioned now, the amount of negativity that people can, I think football has a really bad way of distorting the reality that it's a human being at the end of it, ultimately. And I think football can just cloud people's judgment on that. No, and we see it, for example, with managers who I don't think there's anywhere else in the world where you pray and beg for someone to lose their job. And with refereeing, again, I don't see why people decide to normalize, any sort of physical harm, or again, like I mentioned, any financial detriments, or even worse than that. So I mean, locally, we've certainly had problems with it, especially now with these fake accounts that go onto it. But ultimately, look, it is easier said than done. But if you remove yourself from that situation entirely, there is benefits to it. But then what you've got to remember is actually removing yourself entirely does remove perhaps a positive role model or a positive message for a young referee who could look up and see, you know, for example, the next Lewis-Skelly, the next Wayne Chalmers, the next Mike, the next Elliot. So it's a fine balance, but unfortunately, I think it is going a bit too far at the moment.
Mike, you're a massive advocate of this because I see this on your page quite a lot of highlighting the physical aspect, I guess, of referees being assaulted, essentially. And I saw a clip from yourself in the last couple of days. What's your viewpoint?
So I think, does the media have a responsibility? I think they do. I'm with Elliot though, in terms of I don't want speech censored. I don't want people to think that you can't discuss the decision, right? I just wish that there was a way to kind of communicate from a broad spectrum kind of view that you can question the decision, you can question the laws of the game, you can question the sequence, right? Those are all observable, objectifiable things that we can quantify and we can look at. When it comes to these subjective decisions, though, especially, you know, the one yesterday, which I've put a piece of content out on and I've staked my flag as to what I think on that. When that happens, and I think I counted 5 or 6 pundits just railing on and on and on and on and on about it. At a certain point, your 5-minute rant, your 7-minute rant is emboldening those people on social media and is ginning that crowd up to a point where now you're talking about you've spun them to a point where they're now going to just go on and do things that maybe you don't personally advocate, but now they've been ginned up into a position where they feel emboldened to go ahead and just simply spew vile, at which point crossing a line, making threats, physical abuse, etc. This is one of those things that starts at the top and trickles down and it hits referees at every single level. And for me, when we start handling it in a proactive manner where we start building bridges between these communities and saying, hey, as Seth said, there's a human on the other end of this and there's a human on both ends of this. We need to figure out a way to bring these two communities closer together through positivity and not necessarily through fines and censorship and punishment and all these other things, because ultimately they don't know what we do. And we at times shelter ourselves so much in law and in game and what it means to be a good referee and so forth, that we almost in some capacity, some of us put ourselves on that pedestal and we stop thinking what it appears to be like from the other side as well. And I think so long as both have these kind of opposing point of views, there's not really going to be a solution to figuring this out moving forward.
Luke, it might be a good time to bring your viewpoint in here, because I know the county FAs are starting, aren't they? And we were talking about the penalty point thing, which in the past, I think it's fair to say, wasn't very successful. But there's been some, I guess, positive changes, hopefully, in the future. Just want to touch on that and, yeah, basically.
Yes, I mean the penalty points have had a massive overhaul in terms of discipline penalty points. So teams now accumulate penalty points for offences where players are cautioned for dissent, sent off for violent conduct or offensive, insult, and abusive language. So very much behavioural offences. I think we'd agree. I think the FA's got to a point where we understand that players are going to pick up cautions for reckless challenges. Players are going to get cautions, that we would deem to be part of the game. But the behaviours that we want to stamp out are the dissents, the offensive, insult, and abusive language, the violent conduct. So they come with the additional sanction of penalty points, as well as any misconduct charges that are found proven on a sliding scale in terms of the severity of the offence. And then those penalty points accumulate up, and then there's different thresholds that are hit. and there's 3 stages to it. Stage 1's a warning letter at 25 penalty points. Stage 2 is a £75 fine, automatic. Clubs can't appeal it when they hit 50 penalty points, and then stage 3 is 100 penalty points, and if they get to that, they get an automatic misconduct charge, and the commission basically have a number of sanctions available at that point, but one of them could be the removal of that club's affiliation, and it's got to that point now where enough is enough, and if teams or clubs are persistent offenders and reach these 100 penalty points, there is a chance that they will lose their affiliation and won't be allowed to play football moving forward. So I think it's positive. I think it's good. I think it really shows that we are taking behaviour seriously. And for me, the sanctions and the thresholds make sense for those offences. So yeah, hopefully we're gonna start seeing some improvement in that sense.
I'm hoping that as time goes along, Luke, you're proven right, and those sanctions create positive incentives for players on the field to make better choices for themselves, but also be positive influences on a teammate that they think, I got to bring this guy back. So there's that. Now, as referees, we also have to do our bit. Anecdotally, I would say there's a lot of referees out there that either don't whip out the yellow card or the appropriate card on the field when it's warranted, because they might think, well, it's only Sunday league. I'm not going to bring out the yellow card. Let's get through it. Okay, you might get away with it. The danger is that player is going to go off the next week and do the same thing, or the week after. Another thing is, even if the referee does give the yellow card, how often are they not going to report it? We should be reporting all of the misconduct that we administer. But if there are referees that are like, I'm not going to put it through so you don't have to pay your fine. How many times, gents, as a coach, come to you after a game and said, you're not going to put that through, are you, ref? You're not going to report that yellow, that red? I'm like, yeah, of course I am. But I'm sure there are a lot of refs that try and maybe do the right thing and they don't report it. Okay, you might be showing empathy and compassion in one sense, but you're kicking the can down the road. So we also need to do our bit, making sure that we're still diagnosing and dealing with especially misconduct in the moment, and then reporting it so that it doesn't, repeat offenders don't get away with it.
But I mean, anybody who's listening to this podcast now from an English perspective, especially in Northamptonshire, it's very risky and it's a stupid thing, because all one secretary has to do is say, we've not had this card come through yet, and then questions quickly get asked. And as we've noticed at a couple of recent meetings, without giving any names away, referees have been suspended for not following the process through. And to be fair, that's right, because there's a very clear process. It's taught on the basic referees course. And as Luke has kind of ranted about in the past, it doesn't do anybody any favours. So probably a good time to bring in not the challenge for the red card yesterday in the Arsenal game, but the second one where I think it was Gomez, I had to find out from Chris Rowland who he played for, was given a second yellow card, which, in reality was probably a red card, which goes back to the point that Luke made a few weeks ago when that guy now was only going to miss one game, when technically he should probably have missed 3 games. So that then impacts further down the line, whichever team he should not have been playing against, which he will be. You see the clip on the screen. If you haven't seen it, have a look at Match of the Day. Gomez knows what he's done. Very lucky, I think, to get away with a yellow card in that instead of a straight red for serious foul play. What do you think on that, Mike?
So when I saw it, I immediately I see what the Arsenal supporters are saying, and the impact seems low. It seems on the foot. It doesn't seem to equal the first one, which was much higher up the leg and kind of raking down and ending at the foot. So in a way, I think that Oliver's position is also a little different there, where he's not necessarily as close or as in line to be able to see the full nature of the contact. And I think he simply sees the contact low on the foot. I agree. It could go one way or the other based on that. And to your point, the disciplinary effects of that, whether or not it's a 1-match ban or a 3-match ban or what have you, depending on his disciplinary status, is going to make a huge difference there. And in the game immediately, there's really not a huge impact because it's his second yellow. He's off anyway. But it's that after effect, the same way that, it had João Pedro been sent off against, I can't remember, for the violent conduct elbow that we had saw, then he wouldn't have been on the field against Arsenal to win that penalty.
Yeah.
And so there's always this knock-on effect that always happens. But I don't necessarily disagree with the yellow, but I certainly see how it could have been justified as a straight send-off as well.
And that goes back to that point, Luke and Mikey, that you've made several times before, is that refereeing, and it's a very subjective decision-making process, isn't it? I mean, even the kind of overarching attitude of so many people was, is it Lewis-Skelly? Is that his name? Something like that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm so bad with
MLS.
yeah. Many people were saying that's like Alan Shearer, that's the worst decision you'll ever see, blah, blah, blah. And yet we put it on our Instagram poll, and, after you've got kind of 50 or 100 votes on these things, the percentages don't tend to move a great deal. They're not suddenly going 60% yes, then they're going to 80% yes. It was, I think last time I looked, it was 60-40 in terms of they thought it wasn't a red card. It didn't fluctuate, like I said, a great deal. It was probably 1 or 2% either way. But then Slim, James Campbell, he sent me literally just before we came on air a still, stills of where the impact was, and the impact looked a lot worse. And I'll put that still onto our Instagram page as well. But there were, again, even some of the big name referees who voted. We never disclose what they vote for because that's not fair, and otherwise they would stop voting. So we do have Premier League referees on there. We have Football League referees on there who vote either way. Even those are disagreeing. So what chance of us mere grassroots semi-professional referees got if they can't come to an agreement?
There's the on the field decision, and then there's the VAR, and then even after the VAR, there's the opportunity to rescind. You can't take away the fact that the guy was sent off and missed the game, but you can rescind the red card, and that impacts on the suspension. So on the field, I'm in the camp that that this was not serious foul play, but the best argument that I can give for it being serious foul play was that it was late, so the timing was off. There was a deliberate move by Skelly off his normal position towards his opponent, so there was a sticking out of the leg and the foot. Now, this is where we get really granular with the contact, because I think there was maybe initial contact with the studs on the back of the calf, but then I don't see a scraping down the calf or Achilles with the studs. I see the angle of his foot change so that enduring contact, that downward scrape, is the side of Skelly's boot, not the studs. So that's where I'm leaning against serious foul play. But with impact is a big thing. Where you've got studs on Achilles, the level of impact required for it to rise to the level of dangerous or excessive, it's a very low threshold. I think, again, non-referees might think in order for it to be a red card, it has to be a certain level of whack, a certain level of impact for you to even consider a red card. And it's not like that. It's not like one of those, those fairground games where you got the hammer and you have to whack it down and then you're measured. It's not like, well, if it hits this score, then it's a red. If it hits this score, it's a yellow. No, it depends on point of contact, object of contact, the angle, the direction of the move. So it's true that a low level of glancing impact can be a red card if it's studs on the Achilles, let's say. I just don't think the studs I think there might be a low level of an initial impact with the studs. I just don't think it met the threshold for excessive. Now that would be on the field. I do see why Oliver, from whatever angle he had, might have appeared to him that those studs scraped down the back of his leg, and it looks like a red card. So I'm not buying into the fact that this was some travesty of justice. So I don't buy into that. I was surprised that VAR didn't recommend a review, similar to Bruno Fernandes against Tottenham earlier in the season. That was where the on-field crew thought they'd seen studs on a knee. The video made it look like that was not the case. So I'm waiting to see now if the red card is rescinded, like Bruno Fernandes. We'll see. Maybe not, because there was contact there. It's maybe a little bit harder to rescind than Fernandes. So even though I disagree with the decision, I don't buy into the fact that it was incompetent refereeing. It's a tough one at speed, especially.
Very good analogy, Elliot. You're very good at this talking. What about you, Mike? What camp were you in? I can't. Again, you don't have to tell us if you don't want to. Okay. I can keep you anonymous like everybody else.
I have no problem. I see this as a send-off. I don't have I agree with what Elliot's saying here. Late, it's a clear, almost lunging kind of movement. I see that the bottom of the foot has flattened out. He's making contact quite high on the calf. There's no accident. What he's doing here is completely and totally deliberate. The glancing contact is something that I do understand what you're saying, Elliot, in terms of kind of how it doesn't fully rake down like in the same plane and then stay there. It kind of but I don't think that's necessarily because he turns his foot. I think it's literally because the player's in motion, right? So I don't think that necessarily mitigates the level of contact or that clear, deliberate nature. It's not excessive force, but it's certainly brutality in terms of the definition of the law of the game, at least the way I interpret that. So I'm firmly in the camp that this is correct, and I think that Michael Oliver had the most credible position to be making this decision, because frankly, I'm sitting in bed, my TV's right there, I'm watching it, I see it happen, I go bang on yellow, no problem. I was shocked when he comes out with the red card, and then the replays come through, and I say, okay, that's why it made sense. But that was a view that nobody else had from a broadcast perspective, from a viewing perspective. Even if you're on the field or on the benches, you don't have that perspective. And that's where Oliver gets it, I think, completely and totally right here.
And again, coming back to the VAR side of things, maybe Seth, in some way you can chip in on this with your law and referee hat on. So I remember, from my days in law, when you have a decision in court, guilty, not guilty, and then it's appealed at the appellate court, when they're looking back at that first decision, those appellate judges are not asking themselves the question, do I personally agree or disagree? Would I have reached a different decision? That's not quite the test. The test is more, was that decision within a range of reasonable responses? And if the answer is yes, even though that appellate judge might disagree, well, then you don't overturn that original decision. And in this case, there might have been just enough contact from Skelly on the opponent with the stud on the side for those VAR officials, and then maybe the review committee to take a look at it and go, would I have given a yellow? Yeah, maybe, but was it just about within the range of reasonable responses? It maybe just about squeezes into the range of reasonable responses. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm not going to let Seth speak on that one because I don't want him to get into trouble. But Luke, I want to come to you and say, is that a Premier League red card? You're not giving that, I don't think, at Hales or in Stratford Town or Crispins, wherever you were this morning.
No, yeah, it's certainly a Premier League red card, and I think Mike's absolutely right that Michael Oliver got himself in the best possible position to make the decision, and fair play for seeing it in real time as he has. For me, I'm happy with a red card, to be honest with you. I think I agree. The force isn't there. That's the only thing. The only thing that's missing. But for me, it's more of a non-footballing action. It's what he wanted to do was stop the attack. I understand that. We all understand that. And I think in those situations, we're programmed to expect a yellow card. Now, what he hasn't done, he hasn't stopped the attack in the way that most players normally stop the attack, which is just a casual little trip. The way that he's gone about the trip, he didn't need to trip him in that way. He didn't need Studd's contact to the back of the calf, the Achilles, wherever we're saying the point of contact is. It was a high point of contact. That's not a challenge that needed to be made in that way. There was other ways that he could have brought down Matt Doherty, which didn't involve that action, is where I'm at with it. And for that reason, I do see it as quite a calculated act. It was done in the heat of the moment. But for me, if I'm a player, that's a dangerous challenge. That does endanger the safety of an opponent because of the nature in which he's made the challenge, regardless of the force used. The fact that he has put his studs into the back of the calf, for me, that's enough for a red card. But going back to your question, Wayne, I think you're absolutely right. Would I be in a position like Michael Oliver to actually have seen it in that level of detail? Probably not. The game almost certainly expected a yellow card, and I think that's partly where some of the outrage has come from. It's obviously been compounded by the Gomez incident being given as a yellow card. It frustrates me when fans compare two situations and say they're identical. They're not identical. They're similar. I agree. They're similar instances, but the ball's a lot closer in the Gomez one than it is in the Skelly one. So, there's so many things that are different, so many variables in those challenges. You can't possibly say that because he gave a red for the first one, he has to give a red for the second one. That's illogical to me. And I think there's more merit in understanding the decision-making process. In terms of why VAR didn't get involved, well, it's obviously a lot of it's based on what Michael Oliver said over the comms to the VAR. And if he has told the VAR that he's seen Studd's contact halfway up the shin or the back of the calf, then I don't see VAR looking at that and going, well, that's not what my screen's telling me. That the screen does suggest, if that's what Michael Oliver has said, that is what's happened. Therefore, they're not going to overturn it. And in terms of the final point around whether the red card will be rescinded or not, that's a complete lottery. That, unfortunately, Elliot, the FA's process doesn't work quite how the legal process works. It's a panel made up of an ex-player, an ex-manager, and an ex-referee. Their threshold is supposed to be, is there evidence that the referees made a clear error in the application of law, which I think we could agree we wouldn't describe that decision as a clear error. Therefore, if we were the panel, that card wouldn't be getting rescinded. However, as we know, that panel and those people on that panel do make some rather odd decisions in terms of what they deem a clear error in application of law.
So maybe the better comparison is with that Bruno Fernandes red card that was rescinded rather than this second yellow that happened yesterday.
Yeah. There is an ex-referee. There's an ex-referee, Keith Hackett. I don't know if you are aware of Keith Hackett. He is very vociferous. He is hanging on, bless him, for dear life and credibility.
Desperate for that spotlight, isn't he? Desperate for the spotlight.
I think he even gets on TalkSport. And some of the stuff he's come out with recently about referees is just, oh my goodness me. I'd love to get him on this podcast. But it's one of those.
I wouldn't want to give him the airtime, Wayne, to be fair.
Moving away from the actual decision, it's interesting because we're in a world now in refereeing where we've got all the online presence, yourself, Elliot, and Mike, and what we do and stuff like that. But there's a lot of coaching around, there's lots of call groups and stuff like that. So, Seth, just to bring you back in, do you get coaching on the way players tackle people these days? Is that like a red flag? Are you taught or coached to spot something like Luke was kind of alluding to there, of the challenge being out of the ordinary for so as you were saying about a trip, we all expect a trip, yellow card, lovely. But the way it came in, is that something you're coached to look for these days?
Yeah, so I mean, this weekend alone, we've had workshops specifically on illegal use of the arms, legal stamping, and looking at the different ways in which players would approach these situations. Is it a normal action where you're attempting to play the ball? It's always very difficult to judge the intention of players, but when you look at the impact it can have on the way the players move, I think we're getting a lot more technical in the way we approach these decisions. Obviously, like we mentioned earlier, on the pitch it can be very difficult to see it in real time, but that's why we're coached to see and be more aware and alert to different scenarios which could lead to different incidents. For example, when you've got a bouncing ball and two players, one from each team, running towards each other, balls in the air, you're not really going to be looking low down, are you? You're going to be looking, where are the hands moving? Where are the players looking? So it's all about those little clues in the build-up to what could happen next, which is where we're really trained to make sure that we don't miss anything that would happen there.
Does it train you in the use of deliberate back pass at any point?
The coaching isn't that far advanced yet. No, you can only go so far.
I know there's two blokes in the stand who are really good at identifying that. So, being quite flippant, what's the next steps for you? So, you've obviously got your FIFA badge, which comes into play on the first calendar day of the year, I guess. What's the next step for you in terms of your European aspirations and expectations in your first year?
Yeah, so we're off to Athens next Saturday.
Sounds stressful.
Yeah, horrible.
No.
Yeah, not getting much sympathy off the guys, I can see. But no, so we're off next week. We're there for a week, and it's the introductory course for all newly appointed FIFA referees in Europe. It's run by UEFA, and that's where they carry out all of fitness testing. We do the single fitness test. We do the body fat test, flexibility, laws of the game, and as well as the practical side. And that's where we'll obviously be acquainted. We'll be provided a coach for the year. That coach will come and watch us domestically in our local league, and will also come to a mini tournament which will be appointed to. This also coincides with the elites UEFA match officials winter course, where they'll also be there with us, and we'll be able to integrate with them and bounce ideas off them as the experienced guys on the FIFA list. And then we'll go from there. All going well. I'm hoping the appointments will start coming in, and it's a new exciting time for us. But I mean, it's still a very surreal moment, to be honest. I'm really looking forward to when I put the badge on for the first time. It's not something which I thought when I started refereeing that I'd be getting. So to have achieved it and for it to be a reality now, it is still something which is forever grateful for.
And Slim's asked me to ask you this: is it because you trusted the process?
As soon as you said Slim's asked me, I thought, oh no. So,
hang on a minute, Seth. Hang on a minute, because the Slim ref has literally just joined the live. So I'm going to say this question again. Have you been able to trust the process?
It is all about trusting the process. I've been doing plenty of the Joe Woolmer shoulder supersets as well, which is invaluable when you're lifting the board or putting on a tight fitting t-shirt. It's been a surreal moment. No, and like I say, truly grateful for everyone who along the way did help out. There's a lot of good people in football. I think sometimes we do take it for granted, but when you turn around and you see the guys that I've been very fortunate to be surrounded with. This is the only time I'll say something nice about James, so I'm glad it's being recorded live. But you do really, it does help. Refereeing can be a very, very lonely place, but to be surrounded with some good people, it goes a long way.
Ironically, this is just reminded me of a conversation I had with a lad who I was out in Chenix with last week. Name dropping. You're going to Athens, I'm going to Chenix. That's about right. After all those years of looking after you as well. But anyway, I said to him, he's Ruben Ricardo's one of his in his coaching group, and I said, "God, that shirt you're wearing, that looks a bit tight." I went, "I bet Ruben Ricardo's told you to wear a shirt that's one size too small, hasn't he?" He went, "How did you know?" I said, "Because nobody's ever told me to do that." Because it wouldn't be too pretty, but just to show off the guns, I guess. Bicep curls get the girls. I can't remember. I think that was Andy Humphries.
Yeah, that's a Humphries quote.
Humphries doesn't listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, there was an image posted earlier about a tight-fitting T-shirt, but I suppose I'll just leave that one here for now.
And one of the questions that also came in, Seth, was: have you recovered from getting smashed by Andy Humphries at the London Landmarks Half Marathon? I believe it was 2019.
Yeah, I used to like Humpo, but I saw that question, and I I remembered why I moved back to gym. Was fake news, Elliot. You know what I was saying before. I agree with censorship when I saw that from Andy Humphries.
Mike, Elliot, any final questions for our FIFA referee? We don't often get a FIFA referee on here, so have you got a question for him to finish off with? Elliot, whoever wants to go first, I don't mind.
I was about to say, Elliot had a chance. I'm gonna go. I would have to say, just in terms of your overall development, right? What is, because I run a referee community for grassroots. Nobody above regional in my section or anything like that. But what are the key things that if a referee is looking to move up and take that next step, what do you think some of those? Give me like your top 3 key things that they have to work on in order to sort of achieve that level if they wanted to really start to seriously consider advancing to where you're at.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way of doing it, or what's works for me, is always look at that one step up. Because if you're a level 7 referee in England, if you're a grassroots referee, it's all well and good to sit down and watch a Premier League match, but that's not going to be your next step. Your next step will be that level 6. So if you sit down, you watch what that league is, what the expectation would be at that next level, and see whether or not, when something that actually Joe Woolmer mentioned to me was when we were running as assistant referees, where if you're a level 4, you'll be running the line to a level 3. Do you think you'd be able to referee that match? Could you do what that level 3 is doing? And if you feel that you are confident in doing that, I think that's the first step. Taking advice from those around you. I mean, always be willing to listen, and then look, it's up to you. You know yourself better than anyone. Take on board what you think will benefit from you, and if you think you hear something and you go, okay, I respect it, I appreciate it, but you know what, may not work for me, that's also okay as well. A lot of people, as a young referee, will throw a lot of things at you, but you know yourself best. So it's up to you to take on board what you think will be key in your progression. But for me, the most important thing was, and it's a mental conversation which I had yesterday with someone coming off the FIFA list, is remember why you're doing this. Remember you're here because you enjoy it. I think a lot of the time, young referees will be so hooked up on, I want to get to that next level. I want to get that promotion. I want to referee that cup final. That actually, when it comes about, you don't enjoy it. You don't think, oh, look where I am, look around, this is great. You think, okay, what's next? And you don't enjoy it. I mean, I was speaking to Jason, who was a referee who came off the FIFA list this year, and he says, man, the amount of times where it was just, I was in these beautiful places, I was in these great countries, but I wasn't appreciating what it was that I was doing because I'm so hooked up on that next step. I think as a young referee, what you need to do is just enjoy the time, enjoy that process going up, take on board what you can, because look, ultimately you put so much stress on yourself, you can forget why you're doing it, which is because you love the sport and you love refereeing. So I think those would be my three biggest things, Mike.
Awesome, thank you, and congratulations as well.
Yeah, Seth, you've changed. You never had these sensible conversations when you were in England.
No, I think that's the biggest thing, because I do look back and I reflect on my own from when I was at the UEFA Centre of Referee Excellence, and I was so hooked up on, okay, once this is done, what's next? And you actually don't enjoy enjoy the process. So yeah,
It is a good point you've made, in all seriousness, because as I've said before, people can kind of get enveloped by this. It's their number one priority, isn't it? It's like it's their life basically, in terms of refereeing. And you know, as you get older and you start having kids, or you get girlfriends, or you move house and stuff, you know, it's not the be all and end all. You know, we are disappointed when things don't go right. Of course we are. That's just human nature. But yeah, enjoying those experiences. And you know, one thing I can take with me when I finish is that when you do get onto the on the big games in FIFA, you ran a line to me at the Senior Cup final at Sixfield, and I've still got the picture to prove it. But Elliot, have you got a final, don't shake your head, Luke. Have you got a final question for Seth?
No, I mean, Seth answered my question really well before, and I'm just pleased to hear you emphasize quite strongly the need to enjoy the moment while you're going through it. Have your eyes fixed on where you want to go next, but not at the expense of the moment. I think that's a great message. Also, you've emphasized having a supportive network around you in your personal, private life. I think that's something that people don't maybe underestimate the importance of that, especially as you go up the level and those demands on your time becomes greater and greater. So I'm pleased to hear you emphasize that. So I think you've touched on things that are important for people to hear out there, that people are ambitiously looking at the next level. So Seth, thank you for that, and good luck.
Oh, thank you very much, guys.
Really good, really good. Luke, anything to ask before we finish?
Yeah, just one thing, right? I mean, you've talked really well about some of the positives, well, all of the positives really. But I know because we've talked obviously privately about there was a period, probably a couple of years ago, where you just couldn't get decisions right for love nor money in terms of sort of key match decisions. So that, particularly focusing on that period, but also maybe, you know, when you had some disappointments as a level 4 or level 3 in terms of maybe an observation that you disagreed with, or you know, not getting promoted when you thought you should have, those types of things. What's your kind of process in terms of getting through those difficult patches? And obviously you've got through them now to get to where you are, but how do you approach those types of situations?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two parts there. And I think one is what I mentioned earlier about having a good supporting network, because I think refereeing can be quite a lonely place at times. But you know, ultimately, when you sit down with other referees, how often is it when you're reflecting back on the game? The more you speak about that game is when you're speaking about a negative scenario. You rarely sit down, you know, when you're at a pub after or having a conversation and you speak about what a good game you had and how much you enjoyed it. You normally speak about the negative side of it. So having people around you to actually listen, sympathize with you, I think that's quite key. But the biggest thing is focusing on what you can change. It's very easy to sit down and say, oh, so and so has this person as his observer, so he's going to get a good mark. So and so is refereeing this team; they give good marks. So and so is doing this. Look, ultimately, you can't control what other people are doing. You can't control what appointments you're having. You can only control how your own games go, how your preparation for this is, how you reflect and learn from these situations. You know, I mean, the point you mentioned. I mean, Mike Elliott, just for some background, I started season 22-23, and I had about 3 games in a row where it just went wrong, was dropped for a short period of time. Then I came back onto it, had 2 guys from the PGMO who were over watching one of my games, and again missed 2 key match incidents, which wasn't going well. So yeah, it can be quite a low point at times, but ultimately, it's about how you learn from these things. Whether you're doing the top level or right at the bottom, you're never going to come off a game where you've done perfectly. And if you've come off a game thinking, you know, there's nothing I could have done different, I'm great, you know, that's a worrying sign. There's always going to be something where you can learn from. But it's about sitting down, thinking how you can improve on yourself, reflecting on your own issues before looking into other people. I think refereeing, at times we can all be guilty of looking at what others are doing. But as soon as you start reflecting yourself, being honest with yourself, I think, you know, these other issues don't become as important, because you think, well, how can I be that 1% better next week?
Excellent. Seth, Luke and I have known you for quite a little time now. We've known you go through about 3 or 4 speed cameras in rugby. We've known you living in a destitute Kingsthorpe Hollow in the worst house in the world. We've seen you give howlers at Wellingborough Town, but now we've seen you grow into a lawyer, a FIFA referee, and we're privileged to have you as a friend, and we're privileged to have you on this podcast. In all seriousness, this is me being nice to you, by the way, because we're really, really lucky that we can get these people to come and talk to us. We're lucky to have Mike as a friend of ours and Elliot as a new friend of ours. Absolutely great network of people that we've got through for F's sake and through all these kind of things. So thank you for joining us, and I genuinely mean that. When you stop sending me all those love emojis, my wife's getting worried that I've just put your name in this. But no, it's been great to speak to you and great to see you, and it's going to be great. I know we're going forward, seeing you progress and take on all these challenges of being a FIFA match official, and just well done. Congratulations to you, and keep doing what you're doing, because clearly it is. And I love the point you made about enjoying it, because as I was talking about this at school last week, sometimes we focus on that 5% of things that are not good when the 95% of the things that we are doing are good. So really good advice.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the kind words, and it's been great to speak with all of you guys today.
I'll send you some abuse on WhatsApp in a couple of minutes, right?
Nothing less. No, it's been really, really great. Elliot, Mike, great to meet you guys, and
congratulations again, Seth. Good luck.
Thanks very much, guys.
Right, so thanks everybody for joining us once again. As I said, if you didn't catch them live, you're probably listening to this on our channels, or on Spotify, Apple, or Amazon, if that's still going. Have a great week. I think, Luke, anything to say?
Have you just put has Amazon just got out of business or something? Is that something you're worried about?
I don't think anyone listens to podcasts on Amazon today.
Okay, no. Other than that, I've got nothing to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just press that button, will you?
Okay. Bye.
Bye.